The twin suns of Veralia dipped low into the horizon, casting long orange shadows across the bustling trade hub of Terrace Prime. Merchants shouted their wares, and ships of all sizes glided in and out of the spaceport. Among them moved Kale, AO, human mercenary with a reputation for being fearless but practical. He was tall, lean, and his sharp brown eyes missed almost nothing. Today, however, he walked with unusual caution because he had been hired for a mission unlike any other. He had been tasked with guarding Princess Lyra, the young heiress of the Verelian Empire. She was not yet 16, but already she carried the weight of a planet on her shoulders. Many aliens viewed humans as weak and unpredictable, but Kale had learned long ago that being underestimated could be a powerful advantage. Kale had arrived at the palace that morning to meet Lyra. Her guards had warned him, "The princess is not like you imagine. She is sharp, stubborn, and very clever. Treat her with respect." Kyle nodded politely, but inwardly he felt no fear. His job was simple: keep her safe, whatever happened. The palace was massive. Towers of silver and glass reflected the twin suns, and spires reached skyward like the fingers of a god. Alien courtiers moved gracefully through wide corridors, their bodies unlike anything Kyle had ever seen. Some had forearms, others had translucent skin, and a few had eyes that glowed faintly in the dim interior. Kyle did not let it intimidate him. He focused on his task. "Kyle," a voice called. It was soft but firm. "I am Lyra." Kyle turned and saw the princess standing at the top of a grand staircase. She was small, delicate, and yet there was a spark in her eyes that made Kale take her seriously immediately. She wore a silver tunic embroidered with intricate patterns that marked her royal status. "I'll do my best to keep you safe, princess," Kyle said simply. Lyra nodded. "Good, but do not think this will be easy. There are people who want me gone, and they are clever." Kyle smirked faintly. "I like a challenge." The day had been calm so far, but Kale sensed tension in the air. Something was coming. His instincts, honed over years of surviving firefights and ambushes, screamed at him to stay alert. It was mid-afternoon when the first attack came. Kyle had escorted Lyra to the market square for a discreet inspection of the local security forces. The square was crowded with merchants, buyers, and travelers from other worlds. Then, without warning, a group of armored aliens emerged from the crowd, moving swiftly and silently. Their eyes glowed red and they carried weapons unfamiliar to Kale. "Move!" Kale shouted, grabbing Lyra's arm. The attackers lunged. Kale's first move was instinct. He stepped in front of the princess, raising his body as a shield. Bullets of strange alien energy passed through the air, and Kale rolled with the force, pulling Lyra with him into the nearest alley. Lyra's eyes were wide. "They want me," she exclaimed. Kyle didn't answer. He assessed. The attackers were strong, well-coordinated, and fast. But Kyle had one advantage: his mind. He could think quickly, improvise, and anticipate moves the aliens would not expect. He grabbed a metal crate and hurled it at the nearest assailant. The alien stumbled, and Kale used the moment to push Lyra behind a stack of barrels. He ducked, rolled, and grabbed a discarded energy baton from a nearby stall. The weapon hummed to life in his hand. "Follow my lead," Kale said firmly. The princess didn't hesitate. She had been trained to fight in simulations, but never in real danger. Together, they moved through the maze of alleys. Kale knocked two attackers off balance and used his human agility to evade their blows. Lyra mirrored his movements, surprising Kale with her quick thinking. "Good instincts," Kale said as he blocked another attack. The attackers were relentless, but Kale had a plan. He led them toward the central fountain, where water jets could act as a temporary shield. Using the terrain cleverly, he forced the attackers to split, giving him the upper hand. Finally, Kale saw an opening. With a strong swing of the baton, he disabled the leader, who fell to the ground with a metallic clang. The remaining attackers hesitated, unsure of their next move. That was all the chance Kale needed. He grabbed Lyra and sprinted toward the palace gates. By the time they reached the palace, the attackers had vanished. Kale could feel his heart pounding, but he kept his composure. Lyra was breathing heavily, but unharmed. "You saved me," she said softly. Kale shrugged. "It's my job." But the moment was interrupted by the sound of an approaching hovercar. The Queen herself had arrived, descending in a sleek black vehicle that radiated authority. Kale straightened instinctively. The Queen's appearance was breathtaking. Her skin shimmered like liquid silver and her eyes glowed faintly green. She radiated power, intelligence, and caution all at once. Her gaze fell on Kyle, sharp and unyielding. "You are the human who protected my daughter?" she asked, her voice calm but demanding. Kale bowed slightly. "Yes, Your Majesty. I did what needed to be done." The Queen studied him for a long moment, as if measuring his worth by some invisible scale. Finally, she spoke. "You have proven your skill, but human, I do not trust your species fully. Until I decide your fate, you will remain under my supervision." Kale's jaw tightened. He had expected resistance, but not this direct. "I understand, Your Majesty," he said, masking his irritation. The Queen turned to Lyra. "And you?" I want him to stay," Lyra said firmly. "He saved my life. He knows how to protect me. Please, Mother, let him stay." The Queen's gaze softened slightly, but only briefly. "We shall see," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Kyle followed Lyra back into the palace, realizing this was only the beginning. He had survived the attack, saved the princess, and gained her trust. But now he was a guest of honor and a prisoner at the same time. The palace, with its endless corridors and watchful eyes, would be his new battleground. Over the next few hours, Kyle learned quickly about palace life. Guards scrutinized every move, courtiers whispered in alien tongues, and Lyra herself was an enigma, bright, sharp, and fearless despite her youth. Kale found that his human traits, adaptability, courage, and quick thinking, made him uniquely suited to survive in this environment. That evening, Kyle sat in a small chamber reviewing the day's events. His mind was alert, always calculating. The Queen's refusal to release him was both a challenge and an opportunity. He would prove that a human could stand beside the mightiest beings in the galaxy, not just survive, but excel. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Lyra entered, carrying a small tray of food. "You need to eat," she said. Kale smiled faintly. "Thanks. I'm not used to this luxury." Lyra laughed softly. "You'll get used to it. But more importantly, you need to stay ready. They will try again." Kale nodded. "I know. And next time I'll be ready for them. And anyone else who dares threaten you." Lyra's eyes met his, filled with gratitude and trust. Kale felt a strange warmth he had not expected. Protecting her was no longer just a job. It had become a mission, a duty that went beyond contracts and payment. Outside, the twin suns sank completely, leaving Terrace Prime bathed in the pale light of Virelia's moons. Within the palace walls, Kale prepared for what lay ahead. Attacks, conspiracies, and challenges awaited, but he was ready. A human's courage and ingenuity would be tested, and Kale intended to prove that even in a galaxy of aliens, humans could be heroes. And somewhere deep in the palace, the Queen watched silently, her expression unreadable. Kale had survived the day, but could he survive the trials that the Virelian court would bring? For now, Kale rested, but only briefly. Tomorrow, the real challenges would begin. Word count from 1,520 words. The palace of Virelia was unlike anything Kale had ever seen. Towering walls of silver and glass reflected the pale light of the twin moons, and corridors twisted in ways that seemed almost impossible. Alien courtiers moved with quiet grace, speaking in soft tones that carried authority and subtle threats at the same time. Kale had quickly learned that here, every glance and every whisper mattered. For Kale, it was a new kind of battlefield. No blasters, no attackers with glowing red eyes, just politics, tradition, and eyes that were always watching. The Queen's orders were clear. Kale was not to leave the palace until she decided his fate. The message was polite but firm. Lyra, however, had her own ideas. She had seen the courage in Kale's eyes during the attack at the market square. He had protected her with nothing but his quick thinking and human ingenuity. To her, that mattered more than the queen's commands. "Kale," she said softly one morning as they walked through the palace gardens. "Do you understand why the queen keeps you here?" Kale glanced around at the perfectly pruned alien flora, the glowing crystal fountains, and the statues of past emperors. "I understand." "She doesn't trust humans," he said. Lyra shook her head. "It's more than that. She sees your influence over me." "You act without fear. You are different." Kyle raised an eyebrow. "Different can be dangerous." Lyra laughed softly, but then her expression grew serious. "It can also save lives." "And mine, Kale." Kale nodded, feeling the weight of her words. It was not just about protecting her body. It was about guarding her future. And the palace was full of those who wanted to see that future destroyed. The first week in the palace passed quietly on the surface. Kale learned the routines of the guards, the schedules of the courtiers, and the little ways in which the palace's hierarchy operated. But he could feel tension lurking just beneath the surface. Some nobles eyed him with suspicion. Others whispered about the human's audacity to stand beside the princess. Kale had seen distrust like this before, in human cities, in war zones. But here it carried a different weight. These were beings with centuries of tradition, powers beyond his understanding, and influence that could crush him instantly. He had to move carefully, but he also had to act decisively when needed. It was during a routine inspection of the palace archives that Kale first noticed something unusual. The archives were a massive room of floating data crystals, each containing centuries of records, history, and secrets. Kale had been searching for information on potential threats to the princess when he saw a small group of cloaked figures sneaking toward a restricted section of the archives. Kale's instincts kicked in. Humans often relied on speed, improvisation, and adaptability, and these traits made him an unexpected advantage. He silently followed them, using the shadows to remain unseen. The group entered a section guarded by an ancient security system, one that Kale did not recognize. The cloaked figures bypassed the system effortlessly, suggesting experience or inside knowledge. Kale realized immediately this was a conspiracy. They wanted information that could endanger Lyra, or worse. He took note of their movements, memorized the path, and retreated without being detected. Once alone, he made a mental plan. The palace was vast, and he would need every ounce of his human cunning to protect the princess without alarming the queen unnecessarily. That evening, Lyra found him in the gardens, practicing with a staff that she had taken from the palace armory. She had insisted on learning to defend herself, but Kale could see her frustration with her limited experience. "You're thinking too much," Kale said gently, correcting her stance. "Don't just block, anticipate. Humans survive because we can improvise, adapt. You need to do the same." Lyra frowned, then tried again. Her movements became sharper, more precise. "Like this?" she asked. Kale nodded. "Better, keep your eyes open. Look for patterns. Don't just react, predict," she laughed, a bright sound that seemed almost impossible in the tense palace atmosphere. "I never thought humans could teach me something about strategy." Kale smiled faintly. "And I never thought I'd be teaching a princess to fight. Life is full of surprises." But even as they trained, Kale's mind never stopped working. He considered the cloaked figures he had seen, the palace's internal politics, and the possibility of another attack. Humans had learned to survive by thinking ahead, by preparing for threats others ignored. That mindset was now his greatest weapon. The next morning, Kale was called to the queen's private chamber. She sat behind a high desk, her silver robes reflecting the morning light. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were sharp, studying him with an intensity that made Kale feel exposed. "You are resourceful," the queen said, her voice smooth but cold. "But the palace is not safe. I have heard rumors that you have been observing more than required." Kale bowed. "I only seek to protect the princess. Any threat to her is a threat to the empire. That is my duty." The queen's eyes narrowed. "Do not mistake duty for audacity. You have survived an attack and earned my notice. But this is a court of shadows, human. Not all enemies are obvious. Some wear smiles while plotting destruction." Kale met her gaze steadily. "Then I will watch those smiles closely. The queen studied him for a long moment, then finally spoke. Very well. But remember, your place is not above the law, not above the traditions of this court. You act in my presence, not outside it. Disobedience is not forgiven lightly. Kale nodded. Understood. Later that day, Kale returned to the archives, determined to learn more about the palace conspiracies he had noticed. Using his human adaptability, he found hidden access points and secret records overlooked by the palace staff. What he discovered was alarming. Factions within the court were plotting to undermine Lyra's rule. Some sought to manipulate her, others to remove her entirely. Kale realized that physical protection alone would not be enough. He would need intelligence, strategy, and trust. And for the first time, he understood the real depth of his role. Not just as a guardian, but as a human capable of influencing events through his courage, insight, and quick thinking. That night, Kale and Lyra met in a small, secluded balcony overlooking the city. The twin moons cast pale light over the silver rooftops. Kale, Lyra said, her voice serious, what you've done so far, it's more than anyone could ask. But this court, it's dangerous. Not all threats come with weapons. Kale nodded. I know. I've seen signs of a plot. People who want to hurt you from inside. I'll stay one step ahead. You just need to trust me. Lyra looked at him, eyes filled with both admiration and worry. I do, but promise me, you won't get hurt. Kyle's expression softened. I make no promises I cannot keep, but I will do everything in my power to protect you. She smiled faintly. That is why you are different. You are human, but you see things we do not. You act when others hesitate. That might save me yet. The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of alien flowers, and Kale felt the weight of responsibility settle heavier on his shoulders. The palace was no longer just a building. It was a maze of threats, politics, and secrets. Every decision he made could save or endanger the princess, and somewhere in the shadows, unseen eyes were already watching him. Some with suspicion, some with fear, and others with dangerous intent. Kale knew that being human made him underestimated, but that underestimation was his greatest advantage. The night passed quietly, but Kale's mind never rested. He mapped out the palace corridors, noted the patterns of the guards, and studied the behaviors of the courtiers. Humans survived because they could think ahead, improvise, and adapt. He would use every ounce of that skill to protect Lyra. And as the twin moons set and the first light of dawn touched the palace spires, Kale understood one simple truth. His life was now entwined with the princess's, and the dangers of the palace were only beginning. Tomorrow, he would face his first test within the court itself, and this time, the enemies would not come from outside the walls.